So when I heard that the topic of our TEDx event was decoding happiness, I really didn't think anyone was going to buy a ticket or take a day off work for this. When I grew up, I was led to believe that happiness is something selfish people concern themselves with. And as I've grown older, I've also thought that pursuing happiness is kind of silly. And not silly in let's go to the park and frolic and be silly and happy, but silly in when there are 1,000 better emotions to feel and do in our lives, why would we focus on happiness? They say that happiness, you have a genetic set point for it, and that may be very true for me. I was raised by my Depression-era grandmother who quit school at 13 to raise her 5 brothers and sisters and was a single mom working 2 shifts a day to support my mom and leaving her in the care of nuns for long stretches of time, and then spent her retirement years chasing me around, making me do my homework. She sacrificed a lot of happiness for the family, and I treasure that because without that, I wouldn't have been able to go to college or open my own business or ultimately be here, someone you want to hear from. So the experts say that maybe my grandmother could have chosen to be happy or happier, change her mindset, meditate, and there may be some truth to that in genetics, but I do think it's very important to also remember that context and privilege matter as we talk about this topic. So I know that in part, it's my grandmother in my head who wants to yell at you all and say, seriously, you want to talk about happiness in this day and age? But I know it's me. I was on Amazon Kindle store last night, and there are 9,000 books with the word happiness in it. People want to be happy, but just not me. The more I reflected on it last few months and read about it and looked at research and talked to my career coaching clients and my former 6th grade students who are all now grown-ups about their experiences with happiness, I'm more convinced in my conviction that I want something different than to be happy. And some of you may agree with me. Let me be clear, though, I don't want to be unhappy. No, no, no. Don't want to be unhappy. And if you've ever read The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin, who's also a TEDx speaker herself, she talks about the fact that happiness and unhappiness are actually 2 different concepts. They're not the opposite of each other. And they are 2 separate collections of emotions. So let's just stop and think about that for a second. It's not nuanced. They're completely different. Think about all the times that you eliminated the frustrations in your life, and yet you felt like you were still lacking for more. The data is very clear on things that you can use to eliminate unhappiness in your life. Smile more, meditate, think of obstacles and opportunities. And those things work. They work for me. They work for my clients. And, you know, I do wish my grandmother would have been able to use some of those to have some peace for herself. But again, let's think bigger for a second. In my day job as a career coach, and I get a new client, I use a tool, and it's a scale of 22 ranked emotions. And at the bottom, we have something we could all agree on that just stinks. We have fear, despair, powerlessness. We want to see like how much work we have to do with the client to get them to feel better about their work. And then at the top, we have empowerment and joy and love and knowledge and freedom. And happiness only ranks number 3 on that scale. I just find that kind of underwhelming. And when I think about happiness, when I was thinking about it, preparing for this talk, it always seemed to conflict a little bit with my primary goal for life, which is to have a meaningful life. To be thought of as a great partner and a great friend and hopefully eventually a great mother, and to be a great teacher and a great mentor, and also to achieve something that's going to substantially change the world. When I looked into the research, it's not just me that thinks that there's a conflict between leading a meaningful life and a happy life. So researchers out of the University of Virginia found that people who achieved higher scored lower on happiness tests because they found that negative emotions actually help you get really important stuff done. And researchers of the Florida State and Stanford actually looked specifically at people who said, I'm pursuing a meaningful life, and people who said, I'm pursuing a happy life. And they found that we assume that they're related because they seem so positive, but they're actually very different emotional experiences for people. So on their assessments, they found that people who were pursuing happiness described their lives as easy, and people who were pursuing meaningful lives found that, reported that they were stressed. People who were pursuing happiness came up as takers on their assessment. people pursuing meaningfulness were givers. People who were happy were focused on the present almost exclusively. And people who were pursuing meaningfulness were on past, present, future, even if it meant they had to really think about some very difficult emotions. People who pursued happiness were really good at taking care of themselves. People who pursued meaningfulness were really good at actualizing themselves. And the point the researchers wanted to make was that it's not necessarily about mutually exclusive, if you're going to go live a meaningful life, that you have to be miserable, but to think about, how do you live a life where you make conscious choices and you don't avoid what you really want, and how you can make those things go together. So again, thinking bigger. So, we can do all these hacks to kind of eliminate our unhappiness. We can live an intentional life, and that's what I help many of my clients do. And I can tell you a little bit about my story. So 3 years ago, I was the director of teacher recruitment for the New York City Public Schools, helping hire 8,000 teachers a year for our, in service of our 1.1 million school children. I had meaning up the wazoo. And I was happy. I had a great salary. I could go for the last-minute vacation in a tropical island if I wanted. But what I was missing were those things at the top of the scale that I talked about: the empowerment, the joy, the love. So what I did is I made a plan with meaning as my guiding force. And a year later, I found myself running my own business and being recognized for being empowered enough to publish my first book. 2 years later, I found myself living in the wonderful city of Savannah, Georgia, chasing my niece and nephew around Forsyth Park and playing hide and seek with them. And 3 years later, I found freedom, and I overcame a 20-year fear of driving, bought a car, and I also found love. So I have to tell you, all those things were really difficult. Like, sometimes I felt anxiety was going to punch me in the face. But I cannot also express how grateful I am that I just chose to bypass happiness to get to the things that I really wanted. And I think if you really think about your own goals, you might agree that that's a good path too. Thank you.